I've been involved with connected planning in different forms for probably over 7 years now. And I've made lots of mistakes. I've worked with companies that have made lots of mistakes, but have learned from those mistakes and have been able to capture value. And so what I wanted to try and do today was provide you with some experience from those lessons learned on connected planning, really bring that to life with some real life examples, but also then highlight some of the barriers to delivering connected planning and how FP&A teams can help address those for the business. So I'll first start off with my view of what is and what is not connected planning. I think first and foremost, what it is it's a process, it's a platform that provides decision makers with the information that they need to do their jobs, to evaluate options and data, to consider those options and to make those decisions in a far faster cycle time than we traditionally do in planning processes. What it's not, though, is a fancy system and a fancy platform that will solve all those problems and issues. Unfortunately, you can't just go and buy Anaplan or one of its counterparts, plug it in, and it solves all those problems and all those issues. A real key theme of a successful connected planning implementation is, firstly, understanding what outcomes you're trying to enable. What conversations are you trying to drive in the organization? And what is the end-to-end process that needs to be in place to facilitate those conversations? That really forms the central part of delivering connected planning. On top of that, then, the platform enables those conversations. I think secondly, Michael referenced in his slides earlier on, it's around moving from silos to collaboration, and that means real-time sharing of data across multiple teams. And that, for me, helps organizations move from merely financial planning to actually putting in place operational plans that the business can review on a daily basis. What it's not, though, is automated driver-based planning. And I referenced earlier, we're trying to enable conversations, and really the connected planning platforms should be enabling those conversations. Yes, you want to build in drivers. Yes, you want to automate as much as possible of it, but that's really with the aim to have time for those conversations. And finally, probably at the bottom of that slide, I would say it really challenges FP&A to move from, I suppose, what I'd term adding up to adding value. And FP&A professionals, now need to be able to, engage with these platforms, have broader conversations across the organization, and really help challenge, have appropriate interventions, and hold the mirror up to the business when appropriate. So I'll move on to the next slide, and I want to try and bring that to life with some examples of connected planning. So I've got a couple of examples for you, and I'll spend a couple of minutes detailing them. The first was, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this in your planning rounds. So I was involved in a division that a few years ago, at the last throes of the planning round, the sales and trading teams decided to go for 20% more volume in the last final iterations of the plan. Unfortunately, that 20% increase, the spreadsheet never made its way to the operational planning teams. So that is the teams that plan for how many people do we need on the phones, dealing with customers on a daily basis and selling our products. And we rolled forward a few months, and what was a tremendous success story that the sales and trading teams were bringing in those leads to generate 20% sales increases. Unfortunately, the call centers did not have enough people on the phones to meet the demand. So what was a great news story in terms of we're getting all these leads and able to sell these products resulted in dissatisfied customers, that their phone calls weren't being answered, or they were having to have long wait times, or staff weren't trained up to deal with their requests. We lost business, and that harmed our reputation. And I think very importantly as well, our own employees' morale was hurt. All because the last throws of a planning round didn't make its way to another team. We didn't move out of our silo behavior on operational planning. So what we did in the next, immediately in the next quarter, is we implemented connected planning between the two teams. So the operational planning was seeing real time what the sales and trading teams were predicting they're going to be doing. And that removed any of those issues going forward. Sounds simple, but when it didn't work well, it had major implications for the business. So that's probably one real life example. I'll flick on to the next slide and talk about another example of connected planning. And this is really around top down versus bottom up. And many of you, I'm sure, are involved in expense planning. And we've seen a resurgence recently of companies looking at zero-based budgeting, where you're really analysing every pound, dollar, euro spent to make sure we're getting value for money. So I was involved, previous company and current company, in implementing a zero-based budgeting platform. What that platform enabled was top-down targets to be automatically embedded in the model. We codified in policies, i.e. expense policies, and guardrails within the system. So managers and business leaders knew the policies, understood what was required of them, weren't able to go outside of that. And then we asked budget owners to build up their budgets from the bottom up, but in a concise manner in that platform, in a consistent way. And what the platform enabled us to do was twofold. Number one, the connected planning process meant that we took our end-to-end expense planning timeline from 4 months to 1 month. And that 1 month included 2 weeks of build time and 2 weeks of review and challenge, which was sort of unheard of. Previously, it was probably 3 months or 3.5 months of build and only a very limited time on review, which ultimately ended in sort of overlays and stretches. Whereas actually we had 2 weeks of build and 2 weeks of challenge and not a single pound amount of stretch remaining in the budget. Secondly, it allowed the CFO and the FP&A teams to have much more targeted conversations with those areas that had stepped outside of those guardrails or had not hit those top-down targets. So rather than having generic conversations around, for example, our budgets are too high, we need to rationalize spend in marketing or in travel and entertainment or in staff costs, we were able to have very targeted, specific conversations with particular areas in the business to really understand why were they not be able to hit those top-down targets? What were they planning in their business that meant there was a greater level of activity that we needed to plan for? And both from a CFO, an FP&A, and the business, everyone commented that the quality of those conversations was far more powerful than ever had been in previous plan processes. And I reiterate again, we left that planning process without a single pound amount of stretch being overlaid into the plan, something that, from my experience, is quite unheard of.